Good afternoon and welcome to this evidence session of the Digital Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee into the future of cricket. Before we start the session, I know some members have interest in cricket clubs that they just want to declare for the register of interest ahead of the start of the session. Perhaps Jo Stevens could start.
I'm a member of Glamorgan County Cricket Club and a member of Surrey County Cricket Club.
Julian Knight.
My register of interest, and I'm also a member of Worcestershire County Cricket Club.
And I am a member of the Marylebone Cricket Club. So that's our declarations out of the way. We're very grateful for the ECB joining us for this evidence session today. We've taken evidence from a number of governing bodies of sports in this country before, and so it's great to have the chance to do that with cricket. Cricket has gone through a period of substantial change in terms of its governance arrangements, and it gives us a chance to discuss those issues today. Given that we normally see the FA of all the national governing bodies, we don't often see trophies in the committee room. So we're delighted to see both the Women and Men's World Cups on display, being held by England as they are. But perhaps if I could ask Colin Graves first, perhaps you could just give the committee just a bit of an introduction into the way the ECB is set up now and some of the governance changes that you've brought into force.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for inviting us today to give us an opportunity to share with you our vision for cricket in the future. Yes, it's great to be sat here with 2 World Trophies, as the Chairman said. It's an ambition that we set out 4.5 years ago, and to achieve that has been fantastic. The ECB, virtually, a lot of people don't realise how it's formed and who actually owns the ECB. The ECB has 41 stakeholders. Of those 41 stakeholders, 18 are first-class counties. 17 of those 18 are members' clubs, and 1 is privately owned. There are then 21 other county cricket boards, which is owned and run by a lot of volunteers, and those are county cricket boards like Cheshire, Northumberland, Devon. And then the other 2 stakeholders are MCC and the Minor Counties Cricket Association. So that's our 41 stakeholders. Before we can do anything in cricket, whether it's changing our constitution, changing our articles of association, the board has to go to those stakeholders to change anything. And that's what we've done over the last 3 years on 2 occasions, which is important that you understand where we've come from and why we went that route. Firstly, to introduce a new tournament into our county schedule. We took that to our 41 stakeholders after hours and hours of discussion with them over nearly a year's period. And that vote went through 38-3. So it was a substantial support of that new competition. The actual 100 itself, I'm sure we'll come on to that later on, the actual 100 itself was then taken as a concept to the counties as the professional playing game for their vote, and that went through 17-1 for the new 100. Again, after a lot of consultation, many hours of discussion with their boards, committees and everybody else. And then the last big thing that we did 2 years ago was to change our governance model in accordance with what Sport England requirements were. And again, after a 1.5 year discussion with all our stakeholders, that went through on a vote of 41-0 to get the new governance to where we are today. And our new governance model at the ECB is it surpasses what Sport England expectations were. We now have 4 women out of a board of 12. So I believe we're in a fantastic place from where we were 4.5 years ago.
Great. Thank you. I mean, as you mentioned, I know the members have got a number of questions on the 100 in particular.
Sure.
We'll come on to that a bit later on. Lord Patel, do you want to...
Could I just add a little bit to Colin, just to give the overview? I joined about 4 years ago, and I'm phenomenally excited of where cricket is today. Not only have we produced what I believe is an excellent strategy for 2020 to 2024 that's rooted in the game, that looks across the game. But as Colin mentioned, the governance changes have been really extensive. We've surpassed the Sport England Code governance. We have a fully independent board. We have enough cricket expertise. We have a system in place where we'll continue to engage and continue to speak, a phenomenal staff team, and and I must say, supported by 5 years of financial stability, which I think is really important. And with 42,000 volunteers in the network, it's a result of why we get these.
Yeah. For the board structure itself, I mean, one thing that strikes me as being, let's say, a substantial difference, say, to the Football Association board, is there's no representation at the moment for the 18 first-class counties, whereas with the football board you have the national game and the professional game with separate representation. Is that? Do you think? Lord Patel is the senior independent director. Do you think that is something that should change? That there should be either an individual county representative or someone chosen by the counties to represent them?
My experience of representative councils in a number of environments has always shown me that having representatives on a board, it doesn't always fulfil the best outcomes. I think having a board that's unitary, that's focused on the outcome of the organisation, that's focused on, in this case, cricket, with expertise in relevant areas. So out of the 12 members, we have obviously the Chief Exec and the Chief Financial Officer. We have 5 independent people with cricket knowledge, including an ex-England fast bowler. And we have 4 people who obviously have a passion about cricket but are not connected to cricket in any way, shape or form. So I think it's given us, for me, it's certainly given us far more transparency, far more clarity about where we're going. Decision making has been much improved to what I saw when I first joined.
Yeah, but it is unusual in a way that there's no kind of like the 18 first-class counties don't necessarily have a voice on the board, so to speak.
I absolutely agree with that.
One of the minor counties has that seat in a way.
And I think my view, and I think other people's views, and we had 3 independent reviews that helped us to come to this conclusion, is actually having one person from one county is not the best way to engage. The best way to engage is actually engage with all the people. So all the board members of 4 counties that we buddy with, and we'll swap every year. So we're out there constantly listening and talking and engaging. We have first-class chairman's meetings regularly. We have chief executives meetings regularly. And I think that engagement, and last year we held our first complete professional game group board. So I think it's really important that we're constantly engaging and not forgetting the recreational game in that and the volunteers as well.
Clare, Colin, if I could ask you, do you I want to come on and talk a bit about the sort of are we, as a consequence of the success of the men's and women's teams, are we going through? Is this a moment for cricket? A moment to increase engagement with cricket? And what do you see as being the opportunities for engagement to get more women playing cricket? It seems already at school level that cricket is becoming the kind of default summer sport for many schools now, replacing traditional games like rounders that would have been played. But what do you see as the opportunity for women's cricket at the moment?
I think it's the biggest opportunity we've ever had as a sport, and I'd say that across both the men's and women's games. I think when we won the Women's World Cup in 2017, a lot of people said to me in interviews, this will be a watershed moment for women's cricket in this country. And I remember saying at the time, we'll only know that when we look back and see whether we made sure that it was. What the platform of winning that World Cup and the full house at Lord's and the engagement and 180 million people watching around the world, I think what that's shown us is that there is huge optimism and appetite for women's sport and specifically women's cricket in this country, more than ever before. We see that as well when we follow the fortunes of the Lionesses and other women's sports teams. And what it's given us is it's given us the opportunity to put a very comprehensive plan together for the next 5 years. Transform women's and girls' cricket is one of 6 priorities within Inspiring Generations, our new strategy. And that is a plan that will see £20 million invested over the next 2 years, with an ambition that the board have stated to invest 50 million over 5 years. Those are huge numbers into women's sport. And that plan will see us look to increase the representation of women and girls across the sport in all areas, whether that's in playing, in coaching, in other workforce roles. It will see the introduction of more secondary school opportunities for girls, probably in association with Chance to Shine, who I know you're speaking to later. We'll be creating a new professional structure for domestic female players. Next year we'll have 3 times as many professional female players in this country than we've ever had. And I think it's really important that what we have to take very seriously is that investment works for the whole pathway. So of that 20 million, there'll be equal investment into participation and performance. And you know, I've had a lifetime in the game. I've been a teacher, I've coached cricket, I've played for England, I've worked for the ECB now for 9 years, and I've certainly never been more excited by what's ahead of us.
Yeah, and obviously as a Kent MP, I know Kent regards itself as one of the leading counties for women's cricket. I mean, do you think there are areas of the country where there's more of a job to be done, more of a focus to get to support the development of women's cricket?
Oh yeah, we've got a long way to go, without doubt. You know, we are underrepresented on and off the pitch in our sport. But what I think we've got now is a very serious commitment at every level of the organisation to change that. We've got a strategy for growth. We have seen it is our biggest growth opportunity across the game. We've seen the numbers of clubs grow from 550 in 2015 to 850 now, but we still know that that's only about 15% of our overall club number. And there are pockets of the country that haven't really engaged well enough with the women's and girls' game, but you know, that has to come from us. I think what we've done well in securing this trophy is we have over the last 5 years invested really well into the elite end of the women's game through professional contracts for England, through the development of the Kia Super League, and I think now is the time to really make sure we're growing the game in terms of participants across clubs up and down the country.
Yeah, thank you. Sure.
So just to add to that, and I think it's really important in terms of women and girls, I just want to give one example. On the back of our very successful South Asian strategy, we are now have some funds to recruit 2,000 South Asian women across 4 years to become mentors and cricket coaches. And one example of that was 3 months ago at Bradford Park Avenue, and I've never seen it in my life, and I've lived there all my life. We had 600 people watching 44 women, England, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, playing cricket at Park Avenue. Women from A&E doctors, solicitors to students to unemployed people. It was an amazing sight that proves we're actually beginning, but really hitting something that we never thought we'd do.
Great, thank you. Tom Harrison, do you feel this is a sort of national moment for cricket on the back of for men's cricket on the back of the World Cup victory?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Chair. I think this summer's been obviously has given us a fantastic platform to grow from, and I think that's the exciting thing. I think going into hosting a men's cricket World Cup is a once in a generation opportunity. We hadn't had the opportunity since '99. We won't have the opportunity again for a very long time. But the opportunity to take advantage of that, be ready for the bounce that comes out of a year like that, is something that is the opportunity that we now have. So I think we are really, really well set up to go forward and implement Inspiring Generations as a strategy for the next 5 years. Actually feel that the next 5 years, with financial stability, a transformational reach profile for the game in respect of media, and clubs that feel engaged and excited about the future, with a plan to grow the game so that we can go back to market in a few years' time and demonstrate we have grown the sport in an incredibly competitive environment. I think it's a very exciting time.
I mean, some people have compared this summer to the 2005 Ashes series. But in some ways, whilst that was an amazing triumph, that didn't lead to a renaissance in cricket in this country. If anything, it started a decline. Well, it was a decline, and some people might say that one of the reasons for that was the switch from free-to-air television to pay TV. But why do you think that 2005, whilst it was the start of an era of improved success for the England Test team, it was also the start of an era of declining financial success of the counties and declining attendance at the grounds?
But I think it's a complex issue. I think if you look at where the game was in 2005, we had very different issues there. I think we needed to invest a lot in stadia. We needed to provide an environment where our stadia could get up to scratch. We needed to provide an environment where professional cricketers in this country felt that it was an aspirational career at all levels, that they wanted to be professional cricketers, and there was work to be done around that. And I think the fruits of what was sown back then have you do not get the kind of success that we've seen through the last few years, obviously culminating in the Men's Cricket World Cup this summer and the Women's World Cup in 2017. It doesn't come without substantial investment. I think the decline to which you're referring is a more complex issue. We're dealing with enormous lifestyle changes. We're seeing the kind of figures that other sports are also facing in respect of challenges around participation. I just think we're better placed than we've ever been to address those challenges through the plan that we've built. And as Clare has outlined, the excitement around women's cricket and girls' cricket around the country, the huge impact that we're having in schools, as you rightly pointed out, and the exciting plans we've got to build on that, as well as massive investment into the county game over the next 5 years, putting £500 million into our core network over the next 5 years. So I think it is a time to be very optimistic about the potential for us to put cricket in a very firm footing over the next few years.
I mean, a lot of the sort of buzz around the World Cup final, I think, was the fact it was on Channel 4. When was that decision made that it would be jointly broadcast with Channel 4 and Sky?
Well, ultimately, the ICC rights are ICC-owned and marketed. Clearly, we've got a very close relationship with Sky. We had conversations leading into the World Cup to contemplate what might happen were England to be successful throughout the tournament and get towards the latter stages. Obviously, going in as one of the favourites, it was something we all very much hoped for. And at that point, conversations were had throughout the World Cup as it became, well, not immediately likely that we were going to get through to those latter stages, but when it became clear that that was going to happen, it was a conversation that happened between ICC with Sky and with ECB to ensure that the negotiations that subsequently took place had our approval, if you like, and obviously they did, and we were thrilled with the results and remain incredibly pleased and proud of our relationship with Sky, who have made a lot of this investment in our game possible. We're very reliant on them.
So I was interested to know whose idea it was when the idea was first floated.
Well, I think ultimately, when you're looking at hosting a World Cup in your backyard, you sense that there's an opportunity. I think responsible partnerships come up with those conversations automatically. I think we do have a very hugely responsible partner in Sky, and we work very closely with them. So,
because it seemed to be it wasn't something anyone had talked about before the World Cup, and seemed to happen just at the last minute.
No, not at all. I think not all of our conversations are made public, and I think ultimately it's a sign that you do have responsible partnerships operating in terms of marketing the game of cricket in this country.
I was told that Channel 4 approached Sky about it directly. It was sort of their idea.
Well, look, I can tell you that in the lead up to the Cricket World Cup, there were conversations at senior level between ECB and Sky contemplating activity should the outcome be what it was.
Okay.
Ultimately.
So wherever the request for it wasn't, it was something that had been anticipated.
Whether or not other people were proactive in that conversation, I'm sure they were. It's a very obvious thing with something as exciting as a Cricket World Cup to come up with.
Great, thank you. Ian Lucas.
It was actually my idea.
You kept that under your hat.
No, it's my idea.
So how much money has been reinvested in the game as a result of the additional Sky broadcasting revenue since 2005?
Well, that's a very good question. There are, if I could answer it this way, clearly the England team environment is entirely reliant on the revenue that the ECB provide, and our first-class county network would be our counties have a different level of reliance on ECB, whether you're talking about some of the more powerful counties in respect of revenue generation, right through to counties that may be as much as 65% reliant on ECB revenue to pay for their annual cost. In simplified terms, you can say that the cost is basically paying for first-class cricket. It's probably it's a crude way of measuring it.
It may have been a good question, but you haven't really answered it, because what I want is some figures in terms of the amount of money that has been spent since 2005 within cricket as a result of the broadcasting revenues.
Okay, well, I can come up with the number. Can I write to you and give you that number?
Yeah,
because I can.
It's been a lot of money, though, isn't it?
It's a massive amount of money. Absolutely,
it's been a lot of money.
What I can say, to probably give you a bit more flesh on the bone there, is we are moving into a scenario from 2020 to 24 where we are around 75% reliant on pay TV for the revenue for English cricket, for ECB. So it is a substantial amount of reliance, and it enables us to invest to the extent that we are doing into the grassroots of the game, into the professional.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking the question is because I've got some figures about participation in cricket in recent years, which concern me, because monthly cricket participation fell from 403,000 in 2011 to 279,000 in 2016, which is a huge fall over that period. And some of us, way back in 2005, I love cricket. I think it's the greatest game in the world. In 2005, I had lots of discussions with people like Charles Clarke about the fact that this was leaving free-to-air TV, and I was very concerned about it. And I've heard, and I'm delighted that you're sitting where you are with those trophies on either side of you, and you've presented a very sunny picture thus far. But I'm really concerned about the fact that these participation figures are as they are. And I think that that is a lot to do with the fact that we do not have free-to-air coverage on our screens. So how would you explain the fall in participation?
I think it's a complex issue, Mr. Lucas, and I also think that it's impossible to separate the fact that in 2005 there was a transitional change in the exposure of cricket to audiences at that time. However, we're also going through, we take 2005 as an example. We have 40% of people in this country at that time only had 5 channels on their TV set. We had a very different approach 3 years before an iPad was invented. It's a very different media environment to the one we're looking at now. So however complex the environment is for participation since that time, I think cricket is in the best possible place to be able to answer some of the issues that you've raised in participation.
So can I put it a different way then? What are you going to do differently now to stop the level of participation falling in the same way as it has done in the past? Because you've had all this extra money over that period, and the participation has fallen. So what are you going to do differently?
Well, first of all, we are signatories to the voluntary code, which means that 30% of our revenue will effectively be going to grassroots causes through the next 5 years. That's a substantial increase on the investment that's happened over the past 15 years, if you like. We've got a transformational reach profile. We are going back onto the BBC with live cricket next year. So we're capitalising on
So implicit in that answer is the fact that you think the fact you haven't been on free-to-air TV has been disadvantageous. Do you agree with that?
I think that we're in a position now where the environment for media, the environment for making those decisions looking forward, gives us the opportunity to do so now, with a product that is, which will drive audiences and hopefully wider audiences for cricket in this country, for the betterment of all of cricket over the next 5 years. We're very excited about that. Viewers will be able to watch cricket, over 100 hours of cricket on free-to-air.
I'd love to have been able to watch cricket since 2005, but the ECB made the decision that they weren't going to do that. And I think a lot of people who would have come to love cricket have missed out in that period.
Yeah.
And you're saying that one part of your strategy, and I welcome it, is to get it back onto free-to-air TV. Don't do this again, please.
If I can just try and finish that question off as well, Mr. Lucas, please, if I can. Because I was, at that point in time, part of a county, so I know where you're coming from a county perspective. I think, as Tom says, the game has changed over those years for a lot of reasons. I think the ECB at that time possibly missed one or two tricks. one thing we've done in the last 3 years is invest in children's cricket, kids cricket from 5 to 8. We've launched the All Stars programme, which has got us 80,000 children playing cricket this year in cricket. If we'd have done that before, it could have been in a different place. We've started, I believe, to square that circle.
But we were told, I was told personally, when that there's going to be lots of investment in cricket clubs because of the extra revenue that you were receiving in 2005. You had the chance to shine scheme throughout the period. So I thought that was happening anyway. I thought that was the reason why, or part of the reason why you were taking the extra money from Sky.
Well, it was invested to the level that the ECB received at that point in time. From next year, our revenues virtually double. And the broadcasters, not only are paying for broadcasting, they're actually wanting to invest into participation. So from that point of view, it is now a different relationship with the broadcasters going forward.
Could I add one small point of Lucas? Okay. I think it is common knowledge that sort of team sports have dropped generally, and I think one of the big issues certainly for us is the lack of facilities and the opportunity to play cricket in schools. And so one of our biggest areas of going forward is, you mentioned Chance to Shine, to double the revenue to Chance to Shine, to double the number of primary schools we're going into, and coming to secondary school with girls, because I think it's really important we get cricket back. That's why I learned my cricket, back into schools and work with young children.
Mr. Dix, could I also sort of try and shine a bit more light on the media profile going forward, because it's clearly not just about free-to-air TV. It is also about understanding the way in which consumers now are consuming sport, and it is very diverse. It's obviously across multiple social media channels. It's things like YouTube. It's things like, yes, it's highlights, and we'll have highlights of every night of international cricket next year going onto the BBC. We will also have, for domestic cricket fans in this country, of which we have a growing number, in a thriving environment for domestic cricket, we'll be able to, counties themselves will be able to stream live cricket that isn't broadcast on TV. These are transformational changes for people who want to see more cricket.
Yeah, they are transformational changes, but the way that we have a national event is we come together for occasions like the World Cup final, and we see it. And the fact that it was on free-to-air TV made it an even bigger event than it otherwise would have been. We're all enjoying the Rugby World Cup at the minute, which thankfully is on free-to-air TV, and its impact is increased. I mean, I personally think 5-day test cricket I'd love to see that, at least one test, please, the Lord's Test, for example, on free-to-air TV. And I think that will really be a tremendous incentive and showcase for the game. And I've made that argument repeatedly since 2005. And whilst I accept we're in a changing media environment, I think the evidence of the success of the World Cup final this year is plain, and it was this year.
Yeah. Look, I think in terms of the potential scenario where one test match a year is on free-to-air TV, the last time this study was done was back in 2008, which predates my involvement, but during the Davis review, I believe, there was the ECB undertook an economic impact study that looked at the potential cost to the game, if you like, of a game being on free-to-air television, just in terms of monetary terms. And that was basically £137.4 million to list one test match a year for 2014 to 17. That was the estimated value. That is around 48% of the domestic broadcast rights income. And if you take that now into a 2020 to 2024 scenario, that strategic premium for a pay TV operator effectively makes the strategic investment into inspiring generations extremely difficult for us to justify.
I think it's difficult to justify that the participation figures have fallen from 403,000 to 279,000 between 2011 and 2016.
Yeah.
I wonder how many Ben Stokes we lost in that period.
Well, I think we've got a much better story to tell now on participation, and I think we estimate in our figures we've got 2.7 million people playing cricket. We've got 1.5 million children, and that's a growing number because of the kind of thing that we're doing with All Stars cricket. We've got something else coming through the pipeline as well, which is the next stage of All-Stars, which is 8 till 11-year-olds, which is a crucial time in children's decision-making about which sports they're going to undertake as they move into adulthood. We're going to be continuing to look at our school strategy as well, and I'm very happily ask Clare to talk a little bit about this as well, because this is another area where we're very uncomfortable with the profile that we have at sport, and we'd love government's help to help us drive more participation for children through the school curriculum.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think what has been pleasing from our perspective has been to see growth, year-on-year growth in women's and girls' participation. That's obviously very important as we look to grow the sport and make it more inclusive, which is obviously the right thing to do for any sport, but also will stand us in good commercial state as well. We welcome everything that's coming out from government around the school sport and activity plan. We would like to see that. We would like to see an hour of school sport a day for every child. We think that, as a former teacher, that the emphasis placed on physical education should be as equal as other academic literacy or education subjects.
Well, I agree with all of that, but on women's participation, Mr. Chairman, I'm conscious of time. Hasn't the big impact with football been because we've had live women's games on TV?
I think it'll be a factor, without doubt. It will be a factor.
It's been a massive factor.
Yeah.
Because, 5-10 years ago we didn't have that.
Yeah.
And it's extraordinary the change that's happened.
And we're excited by that.
It's
we're excited. We want a period where we have live, and then we're going into that now. Yeah, we are going into that now. And we've still seen growth every year since 2015 in women's club cricket and in girls playing cricket in schools. And the number of girls within our All-Stars programme is nearly at 30% of the overall figure. We believe that should be 50-50. There's no reason why 5-year-old girls and 5-year-old boys shouldn't be equally participating in cricket. So we will be really ambitious in that area. We will grow the number of women's and girls' club sections so that it isn't a postcode lottery, and so that a woman or a girl feels that her local cricket club is welcoming and inclusive for her.
Thank you.
I'm going to talk about the 100 in a second, but just to follow up actually on Ian's points there, and actually the state sector. I mean, when I grew up, basically, it was like you played football for 9/10 of the year, and then maybe for a week you may get a game of cricket. While the private school down the road have tons of facilities and those pitches, and as we know, the percentage of England cricketers who are from private schools far exceeds the national average in that respect. You mentioned, Mr. Harrison, about government help. What are you actually doing in terms of the conversation you're having? What specific help do you actually need to see happen in order to get cricket into the system?
Yeah, look, thank you, Mr. Knight, for the question. I think ultimately we would like, we've seen the consultation recently which came out to us. I think we would like to see a kind of push towards physical literacy being part of the national curriculum in the same way that maths and English is. I think that kind of emphasis on children getting an understanding about the benefits that active lifestyles can give you is fundamental at any age. But we would like to back any move in that direction that will help kids understand that sport needs to be part of their daily lives as young as possible, and something that schools take seriously.
And when you say back, do you mean financial? Because your revenue is going to go up, going to double in the next year. So are you actually effectively in conversation in order to... Because the keys are, when it comes to... Because I deal with the APG for financial education in schools. Yeah. And the keys are always the fact that effectively you've got to try and... you've got to teach the teachers how to teach.
Absolutely.
In outside of their core subjects.
Yeah.
What are you doing? What do you want to actually see happen over the next year or two in that respect?
We've identified exactly that. And the school strategy over the next year will be working on establishing deeper, more meaningful relationships with teachers rather than necessarily with schools themselves, because the teachers move and the teachers, there will be churn across schools in the teaching population. So we've established essentially, especially around our girls' secondary school strategy from next year, that and particularly primary school, where over 80% of the teachers are female, they are our workforce. They are our advocates within those classroom environments and playground environments, and we've got to have a better relationship with them. And any support government can give, or the Department for Education can give, on how we raise awareness and educate and train teachers better around all sport would be welcome.
But what specifically are you offering to do? In terms of, you said the education department can do this. Well, I've been trying to do that with it's a difficult ask, put it like that. What are you actually going to offer to do as a sport in order to effectively get into these schools, get into these teachers, and actually say to them, actually teach them what to do?
We are going to be delivering a lot more teacher training around how to deliver basic, short format, softball cricket to begin with, age and stage appropriate formats and activities, so that children have a good first experience of the game, so that they can do that for a 6-week block in school and then be signposted to their local All-Stars club or their local club once
and
they
the key unlock is basically is girls cricket more than anything else, do you think?
We think it is in secondary schools because our research, and Laura Cordingley may well touch on this later, our research shows with Chance to Shine that when girls go to secondary school, they are still much more malleable and impressionable about trying a new sport. Boys at that age have pretty much decided which sports are for them, which sports they're good at, and whether they're sporty or they're not sporty. And the research shows, Chance to Shine's research shows, we shouldn't claim the credit for it, that girls going into secondary schools are much more likely to try a new sport. So that's where we're really tackling that age group, and in conjunction with club sections as well, so that they can play in their secondary school and then feel welcomed at a local club.
Okay, just on the 100. Oh, sorry, go on. Yeah.
You mentioned the fact that you played football 9 months and then a couple of weeks at cricket. We're working with a lot of communities now who would like to play cricket 365 days a year, indoor facilities. So one of the areas, so we're investing in non-turf pitches, 1,000 non-turf pitches in the next 2 years. We're investing in trying to build urban cricket centres. So we've identified 3 areas. We've built our first one and launched it during the World Cup at Leighton. And I've just been down there to see them. It's been open 2 or 3 months. We're getting between 400 and 450 children from all backgrounds coming in playing. And I've had a discussion with the leader of the council to say, and I think this is a relationship with local government, to say, can we set up an education facility and a health screening facility in the ground, because you're getting access to children and families that you normally wouldn't do. So I think it's not just central government but local government, where we have shared the cost of that urban centre 50-50.
Okay, just on the 100, I've had quite a lot of correspondence on this actually. I'm looking on, even the other day on Twitter, when the auction was ongoing, there was actually a hashtag Stop the 100, and that was actually trending in the UK. I mean, it feels quite extraordinary actually. I mean, are you worried, Mr. Graves, about effectively why is your customer base seem to dislike the idea so much?
Look, I would answer that by saying that the 100 is all about growing the game of cricket in this country and protecting the things that we value the most. You know, we've just seen throughout the Cricket World Cup, we've seen grounds across this country packed to the rafters full of fans, 40% of whom were first-time buyers to cricket in this country. The vibrancy, the colour, the noise, the energy in those crowds is something I think will live with all of us. The 100 is an attempt to replicate some of that and bring it back to our country every single year without taking anything away from our precious county environment at the moment, in which we're investing over £500 million over the next 5 years to ensure that we're taking every advantage we can to grow the game of cricket in this country. That is our job. And we have to do that in the most, the 100 is a really good way of protecting everything that we're serious about. It's about protecting Test cricket. It's about protecting 4-day championship cricket. It's about getting more kids playing cricket at school. The number of people that I've had coming to me saying my kids are crazy about the 100. They're doing their draft, they're doing their practice drafts with their mates. They're playing games with the new teams that have been developed. This is engaging at a different level with a completely new community of cricket fans in this country, and that's something that we should embrace and celebrate. It is not a threat to the county game. It's a much greater threat to rest on our laurels and say everything is rosy in our garden. We're going to be absolutely fine if we just keep ticking along as we are.
But when it comes to... I was reading Vic Marks's autobiography recently. It's quite a long book, actually. And in that, he suggested that effectively the reason why that you're going for the 100 is that you've missed the boat on the 2020. That you came with this great idea. It's a bit like the analogy I would use is like LCD was invented in Edinburgh but was exploited by the Japanese in Silicon Valley. And in the same way you invented 2020, you had this original sort of big sort of uplift of interest. And then either we did the rest on those, or actually the management at that time, prior to your time, actually then sort of ignored it or didn't do what they should have done. At the IPL, went massive, huge, the draft, everything else. So really what you're trying to do is to effectively, you're sort of now repositioning in order to try and make up that lost ground.
If I can try and answer where you're coming from, and I think I know where you're coming from, is if you look back, a lot of people will say, yes, we missed the boat with our T20. We didn't push it enough, we didn't invest in it enough, etc. And the world passed us and got ahead of us in a lot of areas. I think people will agree with that. But I think the one thing with cricket, and I'm like you, I'm a passionate cricket supporter ever since I was 10 and 13, that's when I started playing. But I think one thing with cricket, it is adaptable and it is changeable. If you look back over the years, when I started playing, it was just red ball cricket. Then we went to the John Player League on a Sunday, which was 40 over cricket. Then we went to 50 over cricket. Then we brought in T20. And now, somewhere around the world, they are even looking at T10 cricket. So the game is changing. And the one thing why this game changes, and I certainly believe in this, is because it adapts to the audiences that we try and get involved. So I think what we do is give cricket to everybody for different audiences, and I think that's important.
Okay. Listen, can I just sort of add a little bit of information and data onto the back of this? Because we've done an enormous amount of work through inspiring generations, through landing the strategy with our network and our stakeholders and fans in this country. I think we undertook an enormous amount of work, research. We collated research from numerous different places. We've got 10.5 people in this country who care about cricket to a larger extent or lesser extent. We, on average, are successful in bringing around 1.1 million of those into grounds through our county competitions at the moment. This summer we brought 3.15 million people into grounds in this country. Largely, obviously, the back of the World Cup and the Ashes was great, but it was also the most successful summer that we've ever had for domestic cricket as well. So we're building on very, very strong foundations here. But the reality is we've got an enormous pocket of fans who, for whatever reason, and we've looked at the reasons, they're not embracing the cricket opportunities as they exist at the moment.
And it's part of the reason for that. It's part of the reason for that. There was actually just the sort of fuddy-duddiness, effectively, of the county names, as opposed, because now obviously they're now city franchises. Or
they're not franchises, they're teams. But yes, I take your point. And look, let's look at the profile of an English cricket fan. And this is, this does not reflect where we've been in the World Cup. And anyone who's spent time in World Cup cricket matches or who was at the Women's World Cup final in 2017 at Lord's on that famous day, I think, the average cricket fan is 50 years old. We've got 77% male bias and 82% bias towards white British. So we've got an awfully big opportunity awaiting us if we get this right to create an environment for cricket which is reflective of where this country is going in terms of its multicultural appeal, our ability to get diverse and urban communities turning up in their droves to watch the game they really enjoy and they love but don't feel part of. That is part of what the 100 is about, and I think we can do that.
I've got two further questions, that's okay. There was some talk, we mentioned healthier lifestyles earlier on. Looking at the following names: Butterkist, KP, Tyrrells, Skips, Hula Hoops, McCoys, Pop Chips, Ridge Crisps. Now, it does sound like a school disco buffet, but is this basically, is this in terms of that healthy lifestyle? These are obviously the sponsors of the 100. How does this fit into that idea of young people being inspired when they've got these particular manufacturers and these food manufacturers sponsoring the 100?
Look, no one in this room is going to challenge the fact that we have a child obesity crisis in this country. But cricket is very serious about our ambition to get young people playing cricket. And we believe that we can do that in a responsible way by partnering with an organisation that can reach families and young people in a way that we can't, and we haven't been successful at in the past. What we are trying to do through this is send messages about education, and McKinsey have done a study that assesses the trigger points which address some of the issues which lead to child obesity. One of those is about education, and we're going to be basically giving bits of information on every single item that is sold to kids, on informing them about healthy, balanced lifestyles, informing them about the requirement or the importance of having balanced diets and healthy lifestyles. For example, the investment that comes from this partnership will enable us to put 100 changing rooms for women's and girls around cricket clubs in this country. It will enable us to put 250 turf pitches into urban communities around the country. So I think we've demonstrated that we've got a responsible attitude towards commercial partnerships. We've done that in the past, and we are very committed to ensuring this is a further example of how we can address an issue, a very serious issue, in a positive way through cricket.
Just finally, online ticket touting, obviously it's something that we've covered quite majorly on this committee. I mean, what sort of, I have concerns about what could actually happen there when it comes to the 100. I mean, how are you going to address that, and what action do you need to see happen?
Yeah, thank you again, Mr. Knight. I think ultimately we would, we're very supportive of legislation which protects ticket buyers, and particularly stopping people making huge profits on the secondary ticket market. Next year, in 2020 and 2022, when we have the Commonwealth Games, it's interesting that the Commonwealth Games ticketing will be protected by ticketing legislation, but the 100, which will immediately follow it, will not be. So anything that government can help us with in terms of protecting our ticket buyers would be much appreciated. We've been close in the past in this space and found it hasn't managed to quite get to the point.
And what do you specifically need? Do you need a change in the law effectively?
I think we do, yeah. We would like to have a change in the law that it makes it illegal for people to buy, to sell tickets over and above face value on the secondary ticket market.
Yeah, hallelujah.
Jessie.
Mr. Graves, I think probably my question should go to you. Who invented the 100?
Who invented the 100? That's a good question. I think it was invented, if we want to call it invented. I think it was thought about and developed by ourselves at ECB, our own in-house commercial team, working with various advisors and consultants looking at what we could develop. So virtually in-house, really.
Right, because it's not played anywhere else in the world, is it? This is a totally new concept.
At this point in time, no. But all I can tell you is that the rest of the world is looking at it. I represent ECB at ICC meetings. I can tell you there's at least 4 countries out there who are looking at how it develops, and they are certainly interested in it.
Can I add one small point? What we did do differently with the 100 was appoint a subcommittee, and that committee was not what you'd regard as sort of people who just were interested and passionate about cricket, but they had backgrounds in entertainment, they'd done the opening of the Rugby World Cup, they were responsible for bands, they really understood what brings crowds to stadia and what excites families and children. And I think that challenge, from a financial background, as a media background and an events background, with a passion for cricket, really helped to shape some of the thoughts that have gone into it.
And was there anybody who was a cricket fan, a cricket supporter?
They were all cricket fans.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. But as a kind of supporters representative, any supporters representative in that thinking, in that group?
I mean, as I said, the consultation that goes into the kind of thing that the 100 is, but way beyond that, into inspiring generations. The 100 is one of 26 activities which makes up the strategy for cricket over the next 5 years. We had an enormous amount of consultation through that process with all of our stakeholders, whether they were officially county, first-class counties, national counties, or whether they were made up of different supporters groups or different views that were taken across the table. All of that was put together in putting a document for Inspiring Generations and effectively embedding that strategy into the place.
I was interested in the
so,
bit before that.
Yeah. So before
the concept, the idea, coming up with the idea.
When you say the 100, are you referring to the new competition in terms of the structure of new teams, etc.?
No, the actual idea
format
of
itself.
having the format.
Right.
Yeah.
So the way that our governance structures work internally is that we will always take those kind of decisions through cricket committee, particularly in this case, because it is a cricketing playing condition. It's not actually a completely different format. It's a playing condition that is effectively changing here. We consulted a lot with the MCC because we needed to have their support, because effectively what is happening here is we're actually changing the concept of overs within a cricket match. So it required MCC and oversight with respect to the laws of the game. And then the support, obviously, of all of our stakeholders, which is critical. And as Colin said at the outset, we had a number of votes through this process. I think to suggest that this hasn't been properly consulted is incorrect. I think, and
I'm not making that suggestion.
No, I know, but I'm wondering whether
yeah.
that's been behind it. Yeah. There was huge consultation, and we've got to a place where if you draw the parallels with 2003 and beyond, the comparison in terms of consultation and planning and the way in which this has been embedded itself into our plans is completely different to the way it was back in 2003, for example.
Okay, so you presumably had a budget for it when you started the 100. What was the budget and how much does it cost? How are you doing against your budgeting? So
the P&L is something that's been signed off by the county game. We obviously, when we first developed a P&L for the 100, it was one of 5 different options that was put to the game as this is before the broadcast media rights process, where we were assessing how could we adapt T20 to fulfil our audience ambitions, to fulfil our effectively the role that T20 needs to play for the game in this country. How could we achieve that and at the same time seek to widen cricket's audience in this country? We had 5 options. The options were all broadly valued. That is 3 years. That is 3 years ago. That is 3 years ago. The budget has obviously moved from that point as the development of the concept comes to light, and you realise that there are costs. We actually added a women's tournament, which wasn't contemplated.
A simple question: what was the budget, and how much have you spent?
The budget is in line with the game's expectations right now, and
which is how much?
Which, yeah, the budget is in line with the game's expectations. I'm not going to reveal what that is.
So you don't want to tell us how much this competition is costing?
We do. We have a valuation, right, which was met in the process to broadcast budget, and the tournament budget, which is being, the tournament hasn't happened yet. It's happening next year. Mm-hmm. We're in the budget planning process, and we're planning the budget now for next year, which will go through the board, through the proper governance structures, and will be revealed after, will effectively be confirmed in time for next year. So we haven't done budgets for any part of our business next year yet, as in approved budgets.
You've obviously spent money on it so far.
Yeah.
Have you met the budget in terms of your spend so far, or have you overspent against budget?
The budget is in line with the expectations of the 100 board and the ECB board.
Okay. So what's wrong with T20?
Absolutely nothing. It's been a phenomenal format which has, I think, done an amazing role for cricket internationally. I think it's something that, when it was launched in 2003 in this country, I think the sense that it would have grown to where it is now globally would have not been understood. I think that's clear. 2020 is a fantastic format, and it's why we want the county, our county stakeholders, to have ownership of it in this country and be able to build something which is doing incredibly well and having some phenomenal success. We've had 8 consecutive years of growth. We're continuing to invest more and more every year into it. And we want that to be the case for the next 8 years. We want to continue growing it. So there's nothing wrong with it at all.
I think there's one, if I can add one thing, just to answer your question. The new tournament actually brought terrestrial television broadcasters back to the table. If we hadn't have had the new tournament and just stuck with the existing T20 competition, then I can assure you terrestrial broadcasters would not have been back at the table in 2020.
Okay, so that would suggest that there is something wrong with T20 then?
No,
you can't
there is nothing wrong with T20 at all. I agree with Tom. We're not saying that. T20 works for a market. We are looking at a new market as well as existing as well. And we believe, and we've done all the research and we've done everything that we need to do, we believe there is a market there for a new tournament. And that's why, around the world, T10 is starting to happen. You know, why are they doing T10? Because they believe there's a market for it.
Okay. So, Stephen, can I just try and shed some light on this?
That would be helpful.
Okay. Look, the research we've done about these 10.5 million fans suggests that the things that prevent them from coming to cricket at the moment, from really getting involved in cricket, is the time that it takes, even for T20, which can now run into, in some parts of the world, IPLs going beyond 4.25 hours for an evening's for a match. So time, the complexity of the game, so the way that it's presented can be often can be confusing for new audiences, and the way in which the game is positioned in this country. So the fact that there is a sense that, you know, our whole strategy is about making cricket a game for everyone. So every community in this country can say it's a game for me. And for whatever reason, without tampering with T20 Vitality Blast, which is a brilliant competition, it's nearly pulling in 1 million people every year now. It's astonishingly successful. There is still more work for us to do, and the information that we get back from our partners in this, our insight partners, tell us that there is massive room for growth. The World Cup tells us that. The Women's World Cup tells us that. So what we're trying to do is tap into that, and if we are successful, which we are very sure we will be, we'll grow everything in the pie. There won't be a part of the game that is suffering as a result of the success of one part of the game or other. And at the same time, what we're doing, and I've been a huge advocate at ICC for the World Test Championship and protecting global Test cricket, this will create a new set of fans for Test cricket. Because still, it doesn't matter where you are in this country, the thing that young people still want to do is play cricket for their country.
I hope you're right. I mean, I really struggle with the idea that the 100 is going to help T20 and 50-over cricket and the Kia Super League. You know, they are going to be I think they will be downgraded or sacrificed on the back of this new tournament. I really hope I'm wrong, but that's my concern. I wanted to ask why the women's finals day next year is going to be played on a Friday, because if you're trying to attract new audiences and grow women's cricket in the way that, you know, it has done over the last couple of years, it's had 2 really successful finals weekends at Hove. Why put it on a Friday? That's going to restrict the people who can go to it.
Rachel?
Yeah, I think, you know, we just on your former point about the Kia Super League, I'm personally excited about the 100 from a women's game point of view, and I think it is really important to say that. Sport has never before launched a professional competition for both genders at the same time. And I think in our ambitions to make cricket more gender balanced, to be able to have men's and women's teams playing under the same team names, we've seen it work brilliantly well in the Big Bash and the Women's Big Bash, where they added the Women's Big Bash after 4 years. It's absolutely taken women's cricket through the roof in Australia. So I'm really optimistic that the Women's 100 will be a great addition to our professionalising of the women's game and our opportunity to show girls and women that cricket is for them as well. In terms of scheduling, that's around broadcasters, and it will also be in school holidays. So obviously the focus for the 100 in the men's and women's game is that it will be played during the school holidays. We wouldn't want to put it up against a high-profile men's game at a weekend. That would be foolish, and so we believed that the Friday was the best option.
Okay. So, Clare, you just mentioned about parity and, you know, launching it, the 100 for men and women at the same time. but it's very stark because the highest salary for men playing in the 100 is £125,000, and for women it's £15,000. Now, how can we possibly justify such a huge discrepancy in those pay levels?
That's a good question, and I thought that would come next. I think I really believe that we have to be realistic about the journey that we're on. It was only 5 years ago that we had our first round of centrally contracted professional female players for England. That journey has been huge in terms of pay from where we started for those England players to where they are now. Of course, they're not paid the same as Joe Root and Owen Morgan and their teammates. But I personally believe that we're headed in the right direction. We're all very committed to closing that gap. It doesn't happen overnight. I don't think you go from, only having your first ever female professional player, let's say it was Charlotte Edwards in 2014. I don't think you go to the year 2020 and you have equal pay. I also believe we have a responsibility if we've got X amount of £1 million to spend in the women's game. I personally think it would be neglectful to spend all of that on salaries. We've got a huge obligation to grow the game, to make clubs better, to make the school offer better, to make our talent system generally better. And I don't think that pumping millions of pounds just into saying that Heather Knight will be paid the same as Owen Morgan, I don't believe that would be right.
Are you concerned about the disparity, though? I mean, it is a huge gap.
It is a huge gap. It doesn't make great...
it's not going to be the same level.
Yeah.
It's the depth of the gap.
I think when you put it into the context of significantly increased England women's contracts for next year, plus their 100 salaries, plus the fact that there will be a new professional domestic structure for them to play in that they've never had before for 50 over and T20 cricket. We're going to have 60 professional female players next year from 20 this year. I think all of that is good evidence that we're getting some of this right and that we are moving in the right direction. But I take the point that on on stark reading there is disparity. But that we will have a lot of players next year earning nearly six figures, or some players going over the six-figure threshold. Mm-hmm. And when we didn't have any professional players 5 years ago, I think that's a good success story, and it will attract talented girls to hopefully pick cricket.
I hope so. Can I just ask, because I think it was you, Mr. Harrison, that said earlier that 30% of income will go to grassroots, television income.
Yes.
Yes. So, taking the point that I've just asked Clare about, the salary, the money going into salaries for women's cricket in the 100, is that 30%, 70% cut the same for women as it is for men?
No, so the 30. I think the number you're referring to is 30% of ECB's income every year will be apportioned to grassroots investment in whether that's programs, whether that's facilities, whether it's other things that we're doing in the grassroots space. So it's more of and that's something that we're signatories to through the voluntary code. And we make that submission every year, which explains exactly how we're accounting for that 30%.
Right. Okay.
So that's overseen by voluntary code.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just one point on the revenue side for the men's and women's cricket. What is the relative value of women's cricket as a broadcasting product in terms of its commercial value versus men's cricket?
I think it's something that we're still very much investing in. I don't think it's something that has in its own right at the moment we're in the investment stage to enable us to eventually generate substantial commercial income from the women's game. We are not there yet. We haven't. In fairness, we've made huge strides in the 2.5-3 years since we last were in the broadcast rights market. I can tell you from a commercial partnerships perspective, companies are very reluctant to invest unless you have a male and female portfolio to offer.
Sure. I just want to get a sense of what's as a proportion, if you want to give the actual figures, if you were selling rights to cricket for the England men's team versus the England women's team, what would be the ratio in terms of the commercial value?
It would be minute in comparison, I think at the moment we are in a situation where we're developing strategies to generate more income through the women's games, and that might be different ways of packaging, which enables you to leverage some of the more, I guess, valuable in the broadcaster's mindset properties. But we are probably still a couple of years away from generating real value from certainly women's cricket in this respect.
10%, 20%, 5%?
Oh, no, nothing like that. I mean, you're not even in 5% terms.
Okay, thank you. Just listen to the answers on the 100. And Colin Graves, I suppose the question many people are asking is what is the problem the 100 is here to solve? And it sounds like it's kind of cricket for people who currently don't watch cricket.
Yeah, I think Tom touched on it earlier, Chair, is that basically we've got this hardcore of 1.1 million who regularly watch and attend cricket matches. We've got 10-odd million who are followers and supporters. And yet we've got to try and bridge that gap for existing people, families, children, all the rest of it. Something different to attract them to come and watch cricket. What we've got at the present time is not doing that. So it's to encapsulate that new audience, in inverted commas, but at the same time keeping the existing audience happy as well, because they will certainly migrate towards it. So it's creating something new, and that's how we look at it.
What sort of impact assessment has the ECB made of the impact this may have on T20 cricket in particular? Because obviously there could be the 100 could be a great commercial success, but that could mean it takes audiences away from T20. You know, families only got maybe so much money it can spend in a summer taking the children to watch cricket, and what happens if they go to watch the 100 instead of T20?
Yeah, and what we've again the work that we've done demonstrates that there is room in the market for growth. Remember, we've got very small cricket grounds around this country. We've deliberately put the 100 teams based in big urban conurbations with different target markets sitting behind them, so that we're able to widen the audience for cricket. We hope, obviously, cricket fans, county cricket fans, turn up in their droves to the 100. Absolutely hope that and expect that. You know, what people want is brilliant cricket being played by the world's best players at a time when they can see it. And that is what the 100 is going to do. We will assess its success in a number of different ways, and one of those ways is that it does not in any way impact or cannibalise the great work that's been going on through Vitality Blast. That's why you still have 7 home matches next year if you're a county cricket club to look forward to. In the same way, this year you had 7 home matches. So the whole thing is designed to add people, audience, excitement to our annual diet of cricket in this country. And we'll assess the value not just through bums on seats or not just through turnstile receipts or anything like that. This is going to be about the kind of impact that we've seen through the World Cup this summer, the engagement of, we engaged 1 million children through the Cricket World Cup this summer, through activations, through club open days, through school assembly visits and loads of other things, players going down to their local cricket clubs, and all of these, not just the England players, but local players as well. These are the kind of engagements that we can roll out using the 100 as a way of benefiting.
So would it right? So from what you're saying, it sounds like your expectation of the 100 is that it will grow the audience for cricket. It won't cannibalise the existing audience. It will grow it.
Absolutely.
And in terms of how you benchmark its success, it will be in that
Absolutely.
way.
Mr. Collins, if I could sort of be even more specific and obvious about this, within 4 or 5 years, cricket needs to demonstrate that it has the ability to grow. That is what the Inspiring Generations strategy is all about. That's why we're putting so much investment into not just strategic investments to grow the game around the country, but to make more of our core, to make our grounds, the fan experience at grounds be better, to play our players better. County cricket, there's never been a better time to be a county cricketer. It's never been a better time to be a women's player. There are, at every level, cricket has got an exciting future, but we have to demonstrate that we can grow this game, so that when we're back into whatever happens with media over the next 5 years, and there's a lot of uncertainty around that, we've got to demonstrate that wherever it goes, whether it's, we're looking at the buyers of sport in the future, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Google, whether it's Facebook, Netflix, whoever it is, that cricket is presenting its case as a sport that has the ability to grow and has the ability to engage new audiences. That is absolutely critical for the future of everything that we care about.
So you don't believe there's any negative financial impact for T20 cricket? That's your assumptions are based on the fact that T20 revenues will stay either as they are or continue to grow as they've been growing.
Well, that is the intention, absolutely, and I think it.
But that's what your figures are based on, that assumption.
Yes.
And presumably the compensation the counties are getting for the 100, that compensates them for any.
Well, we don't position it as compensation.
No. But it will. I suppose it would cover. The issue for the counties will be whether they make as much money as they hope to make, but not that they will lose out as a consequence of the.
It should be supplementary too.
Yeah. Just on the sort of access to cricket sort of point as well. And obviously these new formats are taking a lot of our questions today, but. I mean, people do raise concerns about the traditional county championship game, which has become a sort of, almost like a pre-season and end-of-season competition. I was looking at the Kent fixture list for this season just completed, and I mean there were more county championship matches started on a Monday and a Tuesday than any other day of the week. I think Monday is the most popular day to start a county championship match, and I remember when I was a boy, you'd have a county match start. Alternate weeks, you'd be a county championship match would start on a Saturday, followed by a Sunday league game. So cricket was pretty accessible. Cricket was the best days of cricket were being made available to people when they had the most free time. But if you've got a county match starting on a Monday, I mean, really, that is you're aiming that at people who aren't at work. Or school indeed. Could that be looked at within the cricket calendar? I mean, looking at the times of the year when the county championships played, there's not a lot else going on at that moment in time. Do you think that should be looked at to have more county matches on days when people can go to them?
Yeah, look, and I can assure you, there's an unbelievable amount of work and the county schedule, the domestic county schedule, and mapping that against the international schedule is the most logistically heavy piece of work that we do at the ECB. We've obviously got many decades of experience of doing this and understanding the different profiles of how things can shape up. With respect to the county championship, we've seen that there has been massive engagement with the county championship that does not reflect in attendance actually, but through digital engagement. The ECB also pay for ball-by-ball coverage for local BBC regional radio stations to cover every match, every ball of every match. That's something that continues. So in terms of attendance, I can understand your view that your memories of county championship cricket when you could watch it are precious to you, and I understand that completely.
It's not my nostalgia that I'm sort of praying in aid of. It's just saying when you look at that. I think if you look at it as a sort of someone looking at the fixture list and saying when are they playing, a lot of it just doesn't make much sense because normally, on the whole, sports try to organise their fixtures at times when people are available to see them play. And that's the kind of normal thing, And this reminds what the county cricket fixtures reminds me of is like the horse racing schedule. Where you have small courses being made to meet on odd days of the week in order to meet the broadcasting obligations, and therefore, but not on days when people can go and watch them. And in June this year, Kent played 3 county matches. 2 of them started on a Monday and 1 on a Sunday. And that in June, that's sort of you might think is a reasonably peak time of the year. Children are playing it at school. The weather's getting better, and you think, well, surely we could do a bit better than that.
I think there's 2 things, Chairman, to try and answer your question there. Firstly, this year was a very odd exception with the World Cup year. Yeah. So it was very, very difficult fitting all schedules in to fit the World Cup in around everything else that we were doing in English cricket. So that was number one, why this year was different. Next year, from 2020 onwards, the schedule has been put together by the stakeholders, by the counties. They actually got together between them. We didn't impose anything on them. We said, go away, and you come back with a schedule that you want to have running the game of cricket, which is what you do. So the schedule for 2020 is what the counties put together themselves.
Okay, great, thank you. Ian Lucas, do you want to come in on county cricket in general?
Interestingly, Damien was talking about watching county cricket in his schoolboy days. I was brought up in County Durham, and I'm so old that it was before Durham was admitted to the county championship, and obviously there was an issue couple of years ago now, a few years ago now, concerning Durham and their relegation. And there was a parliamentary debate about that took place there. One of the things that I was concerned about, when I read about that, was that there was reference to ECB regulations, and in particular the financial regulations and the deduction of points. And at that time, and I know you've had governance changes, which is why I'm asking this question, you said to my colleague Kevin Jones, the MP for Durham North, "We do not currently publish the ECB regulations governing points deductions, but we are reviewing that in the light of this case." Do you now publish the ECB regulations concerning points deductions?
Publish, I don't think we publish them to the outside world. It is in the handbook for all the counties and stakeholders, so they are fully aware of the regulations that govern professional cricket at county level. If anyone wanted to get hold of those,
I think
are they available?
They are on our website.
Available.
I think they are on our website. Because clearly
so they are now available. I mean, I'm astonished that they weren't available. I mean, they're not a state secret, are they?
There's no secret. No doubt about it.
So why weren't they available in 2016?
To be honest, I can't answer that question. At this
point,
point,
I think Mr. Jones asked for the regulations and they weren't available. Well, I quoted I think it was a letter from you, Mr. Harrison. We do not currently publish the ECB regulations concerning governing points deductions. Anyway, I would only say, as someone who was brought up in County Durham, that I'm a bit fed up that the 100 is limited to cities in the way that you've described. If you're talking about spreading the game, it seems a very odd thing to narrow it in that way.
Well, it isn't being narrowed. It's the 100 is being played across every county ground in the country. You won't be able to see men's games necessarily at Durham, but you will be able to see women's games. We are very clear in our ambition to take the game as far and wide as possible in this country. That's what the whole strategy is based on, giving more and more communities access to cricket wherever we can. But we're passionate about that in the North East, which is why we took such obviously the issues that Durham faced back 3 years ago, in and around that time. The main driver for ECB was to ensure that cricket had a long-term strategic future in the northeast of England, and that was the critical driver behind our decision-making, which is obviously a very difficult time for Durham and a very difficult time for the ECB as well, getting to that point. But they're in a very, very good place now.
So why have you taken tests away from them? Men's tests?
Well,
if I can answer that one basically. Situation with Durham is well documented, so I don't want to go through all that. But part of the situation which helped drive Durham into its financial predicament was they struggled to sell test match tickets, apart from the Ashes. Everybody can sell Ashes tickets. But they were allocated a number of test matches in May against the second-rate teams coming over, and they struggled on an ongoing basis to sell test match tickets. And that, in fact, pushed them further into financial predicament rather than helping them. And part of the arrangement with the agreement we ended up with Durham was they would not be a test match ground going forward. There would be a one-day international ground, because it's essential that we do have international cricket up there, but certainly not from a test point of view.
Mr. Lucas, if I could just add to that. So one of the things that the UK is the global poster child for Test cricket. We are, in this country, we pride ourselves on the message we send around the world about where the health of Test cricket is. And it's crucially important that as a result, as we move from a situation where we're going to 6 Test matches a summer, from 7 where we've been for the last few years, we're going to 6 Test matches. Those Test matches need to continue to drive the message that the UK is the leading host of Test match cricket, and we and our fans turn up in their droves to watch and celebrate Test cricket, which is we're very proud that that's the case.
Thank you. Thank you. Julian Rose.
Just finally, just following on from Ian there, we have cricket season that's only a few months in duration. The weather's normally awful for most of it. We've got 50 over games, test matches. In fact, the test matches also mean that teams like Lancashire only have to play their 2020 match quarter-final, I think, away from home, didn't they? You've got 20 over competition, you've got county championships, you've got the 100 now. The truth of the matter, you've got too many counties, you've got too many stakeholders. Is that the case?
Not at all. I think it's we're in a situation where we believe that cricket in this country can grow from where we are. The environment is as healthy as it's been for cricket at any time. We are working very hard.
But you wouldn't design. Sorry to cut across you, Mr. Harrison, but you wouldn't actually design what you've got now if you started out, would you? If you were literally a blank piece of paper, you thought, right, I'm going to do a cricket season. I'm going to do. I think you've just changed the first and the second division, the makeup of that, haven't you, in the county championship?
Yes, it's 10 and 8. Yeah.
So you've just changed that. You wouldn't actually design this. I mean, it's a complete hodgepodge, isn't it?
It is. We are very lucky to have a national network of first-class counties and national counties that do an incredible job at developing players and developing massive interest across the country for cricket. We're very fortunate to have that. It is our privilege to ensure that network remains as healthy as it could possibly be. And we're very pleased to be able to sit here today in a situation where the two trophies that you see alongside you have been delivered by that network. That is the fact. The players are created by the counties, and we are sitting here with 5 years of financial stability ahead for all of our stakeholders, and a plan to grow the game. So I think it's a thing to celebrate, not to be concerned about.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you think the idea of 18 first-class professional counties is a model that is going to be sustainable? The counties will still be there, but do you think the idea of county cricket as we've known it is going to be sustainable?
If I can answer that one, Chairman, which is a good question, and a lot of people have been asking that question over the years. I remember people saying that 20 years ago. But I think the main thing from our point of view, and we've decided this as a board, that going back to the stakeholders, we have 41 stakeholders. And those stakeholders are treated exactly the same. And the big thing that when I took over, we certainly had counties who were in financial situations where some of them could have disappeared off the face of the cricketing world. We work with them to make sure that they have a role to play within the English game structure. And we're committed to that. And as Tom said, we've now got stability for the next 5 years until 2024. And there's a role for all those counties to play. Some are big, some are small, they're all different. But they are all part of the cricketing family.
Do you think there should be, cricket should be a pyramid like football, where there's, rather than having closed leagues, you've got promotion and relegation all the way up and down the pyramid?
Again, a good question how they're asked over the years. We are where we are, and again it comes back to those 41 stakeholders where you've got 18 professional counties at the top. And then you've got the cricket boards and the minor counties, or should I say national counties now underneath. Whether we join that together, it will be a debate. Is there a way to do that? Do they want to be part of a professional game? When you look at some of the financial issues that goes with that professional game. So I think it's a debate that will be ongoing with the stakeholders. Yeah,
because you think, even using rugby, for example, you look at the success of Exeter. Not a club that was traditionally a big club 20, 30 years ago, but has now had a huge success and can make its way up through the pyramid. And if you want to grow cricket in different parts of the country, in different communities, then one of the consequences that could be that new teams could emerge.
I think there's one big difference, Chairman, between cricket and certainly football and rugby, is that in cricket, I come back to the majority of our members' clubs. We do not have very rich, influential owners of professional cricket, and I think that would be a mistake to go down that road. I think cricket survived and dodges and weaves and ducks because we are members clubs and we can do that. But we haven't got the massive financial clout of independent people coming in and putting millions and millions into 1 or 2 or 4, 5 counties at the expense of the others. Yeah. And that's why I think we've got what we've got and it works.
Yeah. Thank you. Giles Watling.
Yes, following moving on from that, I'd just like to ask you, is the ethos of cricket, by its very nature, reserved and resistant to change? Is that one of the problems you're having to deal with, of the fans, the players?
When you say, is it resistant to change, I think over the last hour, I think we've tried to explain that we are changing cricket, and cricket is adaptable. Cricket can change. It's proved itself over the years.
But are you meeting resistance?
You get resistance because nobody likes change. That's fact. And as I said, there's nobody more than me as a cricket stalwart who played league cricket for 40 years up in Yorkshire, with everything that goes with what's around Yorkshire from a cricket mentality point of view. So I understand where they're coming from. But they can't sit in the past and tradition and everything else. Yes, we've got to respect it, but the game has got to move on. Yes, people are resistant to it. People don't like change. But even as an oldie like I am, I accept it has got to change.
Yeah, but you're not imposing on people, you're bringing people with you.
No, I'll come back to where I started today. Everything we have done has been in consultation with our members, with our counties, with our players, with everybody else. We have 80,000 members from our professional counties. They have been talked to over the last 2 years, 2.5 years, by the chairman and the chief exec of those counties. Nothing has been imposed. We have talked to them, we've explained the rationale behind it, why we believe it's right, from a board perspective point of view, from an exec point of view, and it's been put across them. They've had the vote at the end of the day. If they wanted to vote it down, they could have voted it down. They didn't.
Right, thank you very much. That was not a question I was going to ask you, but it was just following on from the chairman's comments. What I really wanted to talk about, and I suppose this goes to you, Clare, because I want to talk about, and I'm very excited about what's happening with girls and women's cricket. And I start off by saying, 16 years ago, my twin girls went to school, and the great toppers, Don Topley, was there running the cricket. And the first thing I said was, you're going to get my girls involved, and it wasn't even a consideration. And I was shocked 16 years ago that it wasn't even a consideration, and therefore they did not have cricket in their senior school. Again, I come back to my point that I made earlier. Is this a resistance you're finding in schools? When you're trying to get into schools, into the education system, is there a resistance to girls and cricket?
No, I think we're seeing a lot more openness to it as an option. I think if there is resistance, it's because of time, a sense that it's complicated to coach, a sense that maybe we haven't got enough facilities or kit, a sense that it's played with a hard ball and it'll be dangerous. So we have to change, we have to change those kind of beliefs, which is you can play in a small area, you don't need expert level 3 coaches, you need real champions and kind of real activators to make things happen. You can play with a soft ball, it can be quick, it can be very fun and sociable. So I think if we do get resistance, it's around those things. But we are seeing a huge number of schools turning away from rounders to choose cricket, which is obviously very heartening for us.
Right. And on a practical level, what are you doing to get into those establishments?
Into schools?
Yeah.
Well, we're developing a whole new school strategy over the next 5 years that will target primary schools and secondary schools and private schools, so we'll have different approaches for those. We'll be continuing to work with Chance to Shine. We use several of our England players to go and do player appearances in schools to try to be role models and to show girls that they can have a future in the sport, or that they can, there is a pathway for them. The investment that we're making through Inspiring Generations, the 20 million, a large amount of that will be going into secondary schools and clubs, but a huge amount will also be going into county age group talent programmes. So historically, we haven't invested anywhere near as much as you would expect. You will expect this to be the case. We haven't invested as much in recruiting and supporting talented girls as we have talented boys. And we're going to be making a real step change in that area across all of our counties, first class and national counties. And I think that visibility of a talent pathway is really important for teachers to see it, to be able to connect to it, to be able to understand the rationale for playing cricket in their schools, that there is somewhere for those girls to go and to be supported as talented athletes.
Now, what more can we do as government, as parliamentarians, to help you in that process?
That's a good question. I think we've covered a little bit already about certainly in the state schools is increasing the focus on sport generally. We know the huge benefits that team sports can bring to children's mental, emotional and physical health. We know what cricket as a team sport can do more widely for integration and for all of those very good can generate very good societal benefits. And I think having your advocacy and support in why team sport matters, and particularly why it matters for girls. We know that girls have a fear when they enter their teenage years of playing sport. They haven't been made generally to feel as welcome in sport. They haven't seen a future for them in the game, and that's now starting. And it teaches them, as we know it, we know that girls feel more judged if they're not deemed as traditionally sporty, and that fear of judgment can put a lot of girls off. So I think that there is a lot to do, and I think working in partnership we would really, really appreciate that.
But would you think that the disparity at the top level of pay, as referred to, that might be not helping?
No, I think the opposite to that, and I think that now women can earn. 10 years ago you couldn't earn a living as a woman in a team sport. Now you can. That's a huge positive, and we should all jointly celebrate that and show that the direction of travel that we're on is a really healthy one. Good.
That's okay. Moving on to you've launched the new action plan, women's and girls cricket, but and that's very welcome. But it's been 2 years since the cup was brought home. Do you feel you didn't move quickly enough on this?
I've been asked this a couple of times. I think you can always ask, why didn't you do something sooner? And I think, a few things happened around after the World Cup, around the broadcast deal, the level of investment that we knew was going to be at our disposal or to our advantage. And we had a huge case for change piece of work to do. You talk about the change question a couple of questions ago. We did have to do quite a big piece of work, consultative work with all of our stakeholders as to why there was a really important case for change here, and that cricket clubs, whether that be recreational clubs or professional clubs, their previous existence had really been in the main about looking after men and boys playing the game.
Did you not see in advance that winning the Women's World Cup was going to be a big movement for you too?
Yeah, we did, but it wasn't until around that time that we knew exactly what investment we were going to have, and that we would have a strategy that was starting to take shape at that time, and that we had the buy-in from everybody across the organisation and the game and the board to make women's and girls cricket one of 6 key priorities. So I do appreciate your question, shouldn't we have been set up a little sooner? But I think, it takes quite a lot of organisational change to deliver what we want to deliver, and we're not going to deliver it from Lords or from one of our other regional offices. This is going to be a huge local network of people, new club development officers, new strategies with teachers, new investment into female coaches. How do we make female coaches more visible? And that's taken us a lot of time to do that work. It has been a good couple of years in the making.
Right, thank you.
Mr. Watling, if I could just add to that,
please,
if you don't mind. I think the other thing is we were coming to the end of a strategic cycle right now, actually. So as we move in, we actually launched this strategy January this year, and the kind of consultation that strategy took is immense. Hundreds of meetings and enormous with all of our stakeholders to make sure everyone is comfortable with where we're going. It's difficult to summarise how different the Transform Women and Girls pillar is from where we have been. It is a complete transformation, and embedding that kind of mindset shift as much as anything else, and it comes along with unconscious bias training and all the kind of shifts in mentality through administration as much through the playing ranks. That is a massive piece of work, and I genuinely think it would have looked very odd if it hadn't been launched as part of a wider strategy for the game, because it is our single biggest opportunity for growth.
So going back to my original point, you feel you're winning that point when my girls went to school and it wasn't even a consideration. You're beginning to get there.
I think we are. I too have that same challenge with two girls who now think cricket is something they are desperate to play, and they do.
Thank you for that. It's just that this new strategy is being launched in 8 regional centres. Is that right?
Yes.
And
at the elite level.
At the elite level.
But every county will play a role within club development and county age group talent pathways. The 8 regional model is around our new elite domestic structure.
So you
it's
will
8
be reaching
teams.
out to the grassroots around as well?
Oh yeah, as I said earlier, half of the money is going into grassroots, into facilities, secondary schools and club development officers to support clubs to become more sustainable. Yeah. I mentioned earlier we've seen growth in women's and girls club cricket, 10 to 15% every year since 2015, but we've also seen churn. So for every 30 sections that start up, 15-fold. And we now understand what those reasons are. And so we'll be deploying a network of club development officers to support clubs on becoming more sustainable for women and girls. So the counties and the recreational game have got a huge role to play across growing the base and in local county age group talent programmes. The 8 regional model is very much around our 8 senior team structure and our 8 academies from a talent perspective.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Clive.
Just following on from that, how is grassroots development funded? What's the sources of the money? Is it just the ECB, or do you get money from Sport England? Or
We get so we have got some government funding. We've been given 1.2 million to train up 2,000 female coaches, particularly for disadvantaged communities, which is something we're very grateful for. The county boards sometimes get money from local councils and local government, but I don't think there's any central government Sport England funding now. Previously, Chance to Shine received Sport England funding. That's not the case anymore, as far as I'm aware.
Okay. And so, what is success for cricket going forwards? I mean, we've got these marvellous, trophies here, which are, it is wonderful to see them. But we have got declining participation figures, and you also have this problem that in the national team, 43% of the male team went to independent schools, and 35% of the women's team went to independent schools. So how would that compare, say, back over the last decade? How has that changed?
Do you want to take this?
Happy to, yeah. I think those numbers are, Mr. Efford, concerning. We acknowledge them. They've probably remained pretty consistent over the last decade. The reason that number is so high in the women's game is that lots of those young women went to essentially private schools on cricket scholarships and played with boys. Natalie Siver would be an example of that. I think that's exactly why we're laying out our plans as we have. We need cricket to be more accessible, and our markers of success will be around engagement with schools, clubs, and participation rates. So we do acknowledge it. It's where the game's been, and we've got to change that.
So is one of the problems here that the game is made more accessible in independent schools, so therefore a higher proportion of people there play it? And with the decline of free-to-air coverage of cricket, that you're almost bound not to reduce that figure, because access to cricket is so limited now, either through TV coverage or participation in non-independent schools. Isn't your strategy making this worse?
I think our strategy is trying to address that point by saying we want to bring down the barriers, and one of the key pillars of the strategy is making cricket more accessible, whether that's through access through digital, whether it's through developing a new competition, which we talked about, whether it's through a complete relaunch of our strategy for giving kids access to cricket at the earliest stage of their career. We've launched All Stars Cricket, which is the 5 to 8 year olds entry-level programme, which has been very successful, and it's going into its 4th year. We're about to launch the next stage of that, which is being supported by relationships with media companies now that are not transactional, they are strategic partnerships. And I think our partnerships are very real in wanting to leave a positive legacy for the investments that they make. So, for example, when we talk about making cricket accessible and we talk about going back onto the BBC, and it's not just about linear channels and being on BBC Two on Thursday nights and Saturday nights. It's about the One Show. It's about CBeebies. It's about the BBC Asian network. It's about being on radio. It's about Test Match Special, going into its to its 7th decade of partnership with English cricket. It's about the enormous digital engagement that the BBC brings us, and all of our social channels do. When we won the World Cup, the Men's World Cup, I should say, it was the biggest story the BBC website had ever carried, ever. Not just sports story, any story. The game is massive, and if the World Cup taught us anything, Men's World Cup, if the Men's World Cup taught us anything, it is that the game is enormous in this country, and we've got an enormous amount to tap into with these accessibility strategies that will help us address the very issue you're highlighting.
Can I just ask one quick question about the grassroots again, and that is cooperation with other sports.
Yeah.
In order to get economies of scale when you're going into schools, do you cooperate with rugby, football, tennis, and other sports?
Yes, we do, and actually there's a live conversation going on at the moment with the Premier League around how we engage and make it easy for teachers to teach cricket, teach activity really, as opposed to the complexities of football or cricket, but partner with organisations that can help us deliver scale and help us with this significant challenge of getting into the national curriculum and getting into the mindset of teachers thinking that cricket's not a complicated sport to teach. It's about running around with a bat and ball.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Ahead of the 2017 Women's World Cup, we set up a 3-way national governing body group with cricket, netball and hockey, knowing that we had the amazing privilege of 3 consecutive home World Cups in those sports. And I think that's something we need to do even more of. I think your point there around economies of scale and what is best practice and how can we learn from other sports around what does make that relationship with the teaching community, and how do we make it easier with online teaching resources for lots of the basic skills that are across all sports. And I think there were some really good learnings from that 3-way national governing body group, and I think we should continue to build on those ways of working.
So when we're investing in facilities, do we get it right? Do we design some sports out? I mean, I can recall when I was involved with developing an all-weather pitch in my constituency, where we partnered with hockey, who never struck a ball on the pitch after it was all done, but this was the deal we had to do with football. But do we, when we do that sort of thing, do we freeze out other sports? Are we thinking enough about how we bring all sports together and make sure the facilities are accessible when we spend a lot of money on them?
Mr. Effer, I think we're really good at this actually in sport. I think our facilities team is based in Manchester, and they do an unbelievable job in accessing local community heads to ensure that and sources of funding to make sure that every pound that we spend, and the kind of ratio that we use is every pound that we commit to facilities funding goes into £3 of funding for that particular facility. So either match funding from local councils, we do a lot of work with the Football Foundation, for example. These kind of things, the Marathon Trust, the London Marathon Trust, and all these different sources of revenue are really, really important ones for cricket to leverage. I think we're really good at that particular thing. I will say, however, that the average age of a cricket pavilion in this country is now around 52 years old, and we could have 10 times the amount of funding into facilities, and it's not enough for what we need to do.
Well, talking about sources of funding, so how much do you get back into the sport from gambling?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Efford. I think it's probably the only part of industry that doesn't commit any funding to cricket at all. Everyone else who has a relationship with us, whether you're a fan, a ticket buyer, you want to buy a bit of merchandise, or you're a broadcast partner, or you're a licensee or an official partner, they're all committing. They're all partnering with cricket and paying for that right. I can't say the same for the betting industry.
So they profit from what are basically your intellectual property rights, your fixtures.
Yes, we estimate that UK betting, the amount of money bet on cricket in the UK is around £713 million.
That's the figure I've got. You've got the Gambling Commission figure.
That's right.
For 2017-18. Yeah. And so, do you have any dialogue with the government about saying to them, look, the gambling industry is acting unreasonably. They will not invest anything back into grassroots sport. Why don't you place a levy on them? Have you ever had those discussions with them?
We've mentioned it softly at to Sports Minister a few years ago, and it was something that was raised in the Sports Business Council that was briefly in existence. But I would support anything that we could do to enable us to put that message through, that we would very much, we put massive steps in place to ensure that betting on cricket does not impact us from an integrity perspective. That is something that we spend an unbelievable amount of time thinking about. Our fans have to believe what they see is real, and if you don't have that, then literally you don't have a sport. And we spend an awful lot of money on our anti-corruption and integrity departments, but quite beyond that, in my opinion, these businesses who profit from cricket should be investing in the development of the very thing they profit from, and that is development of players, grassroots, all of that.
You haven't got any idea of a figure of how they profited from the World Cup, have you?
No, I wouldn't have that figure, because we don't have those direct relationships with the industry that would enable us to get access to that figure.
Right. Can I just move on to your finances? Because you've had a dramatic drop in your reserves over the last 3 years. So you have an operating deficit, according to figures that we've seen, of 23 million. Yet you've got these plans to commit 450 million of direct funding to the network of county cricket clubs during a 5-year period. This includes improvements in club facilities and infrastructure, and constitutes 60% increase on the current direct funding levels. So how's all that going to add up then?
Well, it's clearly a strategy. It's clearly something that's designed to create sustainability into the network and build robust businesses for our counties as much as anything else. In terms of the reserve levels, I'm sure Colin will go into it in a second, but we've also had some, there's been a very, our revenues are looked at really in 4-year cycles. The thing that's been really different about the last 4 years as to the previous 4 years and the previous 4 years to that has been the change in the value being extracted from the Indian market in respect of broadcast rights, which up until around 2014-15, the value of Test cricket in the Indian market was very different to what it is now, and that's really what you're seeing come to light there, is the impact of IPL and a T20, a very discerning T20 audience in India. That has had an impact on the way in which that audience regards Test cricket globally. Every single board has kind of seen that decline in Indian broadcast revenue, but it's one of the reasons why our reserves are down, and Colin will go into the principal reason.
I can just explain basically, as Tom said, our reserves have always gone in a 4-year cycle where you get money at the start of the cycle, and then it drifts down over a period by the expenditure and everything we need to do. So it was always planned that our reserves would drop over that 4-year cycle. Going forward for the new next year 5-year cycle, our reserves, which has been done through our audit committee, chairman of audit, and our FD, will build up to somewhere in the region of £65 million, and that is with a new income coming in from the new broadcasting.
So you anticipate that the current deficit will be turned around, and is that as a consequence of 100?
it's a combination of everything. It's the total new broadcasting deal, including the 100, including the international, everything.
And that is. You anticipate that the income being sufficient not only to create that turnaround, but also the levels of expenditure that you're planning. You're confident on that.
Yes.
Okay. Can I just move on just quickly then to your new governance arrangements that you brought in 2017? Do you think that they give a voice to the entire cricket community? Do you think counties and others have a voice through that?
Yep. I think it's important to recognise how much work has been done over the last 2 to 3 years. We had 3 external reviews and, as Colin mentioned earlier, a long internal review that resulted in around 72 recommendations, 70% of which are done and the 30% will be done in this next year. Besides having a governance structure that it surpasses the Sport England Code of Practice, we, as I mentioned earlier, we consistently engage with our first-class county chairman, with our national counties, and we also have now established a professional game group where the first-class counties will be regularly discussing with us issues that arise with them. So there's a constant engagement and consultation process. But at the board level, hopefully we're extremely transparent. We're focused on our delivery of inspiring generations. We're financially astute with it, ensuring the figures that Colin mentioned earlier are made. And we have very clear, honest, transparent rules, procedures and systems that have developed very clearly in the last 2 years.
So if the counties and other parts of the sport were sitting here, they would agree with that, would they?
They actually voted for it. I mean, we had a vote at the end of the day in terms of the structure of the new board, and that was voted on by the counties. Like Colin said, we couldn't alter anything that the counties don't agree to.
If I can clarify as well, Mr. Everett, the question you've asked there. Having sat on the other side of the fence as a county chairman for a number of years, I can assure you now and over the last 3.5 years, there has been more communication, more consultation, more discussion with the county chairman, the chief exec, than ever before in the history of the ECB. That is fact.
And as part of the new management structure, you introduced 4 non-executive directors that don't have anything to do with cricket. They have no history or past with cricket. What was the purpose of that? What were you seeking to achieve when you did it?
It's a diversity of skills on the board. So we have, phenomenal talent in terms of media, finance, diversity and inclusion, commercial activity, acumen. So I'm one of those people who don't have a connection with cricket, but I love cricket with a passion. I've played since I could walk. So I mean, there's that element of it, but I bring something else to the board besides a cricket history.
And the Good Governance Institute called for you to introduce a board code of conduct alongside a programme of board professional development.
Yes.
How is that?
And that's been completed. We have a board induction for every new non-exec director that comes. We have a director's handbook. We have ongoing reviews and appraisals, and we're hoping we'll take something akin to that out to the counties as well, and help them develop their code of conduct as well.
Okay, thank you for that. And can I just ask one quick question on the secondary ticketing, because it's a particular bugbear on mine. How much do you think that secondary ticketing costs the sport?
I don't have those numbers, Mr.
But
there would be a massive amount.
Substantial.
Yeah.
And
out of fans' pockets.
And I mean, is there anything you answered the question earlier on about what rules could be brought in or what regulations could be brought in to restrict it further? But is there any more that you can do to protect the fans? Because I mean, I've just been through this where my family have been buying tickets for Glastonbury, and you've got to register before you can't just rock up and be a botnet. You've got to have a photograph. You've got to register before you could even bid for the tickets. And then when you turn up, your photograph is on your ticket. Is there more that can be done, even within the regulations now, to I don't think you'll ever stop it completely, but minimise this secondary ticketing market that is absolutely ripping off fans.
Yeah, I'm sure there is more we can do, Mr. Efford. I mean, we work very closely with our first-class counties on all matters of ticketing. We don't sell the vast majority of tickets to fans directly. The ECB don't necessarily get involved in that process. Actually, ironically, we do when it's an ICC-owned tournament, but we don't for England or obviously county events. And in the 100, we have an arrangement with counties where that will be a relationship that is closer than it's ever been. So the opportunity for developing a better way of ensuring fans are protected is there for us now. So we will certainly take steps to ensure that we do as much as we can to protect fans. It's a big problem for us.
But I've heard that for years. We'll do our best, and it still goes on. I mean, are there any concrete proposals to make any changes to how you sell tickets that would protect fans from this?
It's not something that's come to our board, and it's not something that we've discussed in detail. But I will take it from this meeting and definitely raise it with counties and come back to you and write to you with steps that we're prepared to take to protect fans.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of final questions from me for this panel. I just wanted to be clear on with the 100. Was the decision on where the teams would be based, was that taken by the ECB? Was there a bidding process? Could people put in offers to demonstrate how they could meet the criteria for being a host city, if you like?
Yes, absolutely. There was a full process of bidding for the effectively the rights to stage to host a team, and for those effectively licenses to be made available for a period of time, which is 5 years. So that process was dealt with through an independent panel that looked at the submissions, and then we took it through the 100 board, which is the official subcommittee of the board, and then to the ECB board for final decision.
Would those criteria, though, have made it practically impossible for anyone that wasn't one of the test venue grounds or either current or previous to bid?
No, anyone was welcome to bid, absolutely. Anybody at all could bid. I think we were very clear about the criteria that we wanted to introduce, which was the concept of developing a wider audience, which would have definitely meant that if you were in a large conurbation around the country, it would have been an advantage. That wasn't to say that it was impossible for other grounds to be successful, but it was designed specifically around engaging with new communities around the country and to enable us to get the kind of impact that we've had through the Cricket World Cup on a more regular basis.
But was it were there criteria around experience of hosting major cricket matches as part of it? Because I could think of, you might have cities that have got sports venues that could be adapted to host cricket but haven't done it before.
Yes, I think all of our grounds are pretty experienced in hosting.
This wasn't the question I asked. It was just sort of if a bidder had come forward and said, well, we meet a lot of the criteria, but this isn't a test ground.
I see.
But we can actually create a venue of the size and quality required.
As in build a completely new venue, for example,
or extend or adapt an existing cricket facility to make it a larger one to deal with a bigger audience. Were options like that considered possible, or was it?
Yes, although I think what we were trying not to do through this process is impose huge costs on a ground's ability to get itself into the kind of shape for hosting men's 100 ball games. I will just say that every ground will be hosting 100 events. You're I think referring to the men's events, but It was a process that was pretty clear about what we were trying to achieve. I don't think it was in any way counting against counties that was discriminating against counties in any way. I really don't think that was the case.
I suppose I was interested in what were the realistic possibilities of a range of different bids coming in from that could be seriously considered, or was this always going to be a format that rested largely on the cities that are used to hosting big cricket matches and have got test grounds to host them?
I think the drivers behind why we wanted to develop a new competition were about developing a tournament that could get into this 10.5 million fans. So having a sense of where those fans were, and we obviously had a sense through demographic profiling. We did a lot of catchment area research to understand how far fans travel when they buy tickets and what they're prepared to, nights of the week where they're prepared to travel, nights of the week where they're not. That kind of detailed information went into the submissions to enable us to make the right decisions about where these teams should be based, because clearly availability of getting to grounds is an important part of this, and that obviously puts the larger cities in the country in an advantageous position.
What's your view on the travel time?
Well, it changes dramatically based on night of the week, based on opposition, and based on distance from ground. So, you might find a fan in and around Leeds would be prepared to travel further to watch a Roses match than they would against another rival around, because of that local derby environment. So that's the kind of detailed information that we looked at and that we have and we look at regularly.
But sorry, I'm not really clear on what you said. That's a criteria. So I'm just interested in what those criteria apply. Do you say that actually for a match like this, we don't think people will travel more than an hour or 2 hours, or?
Yeah, I think I'll have to get back to you on the exact level that we thought. But I think if you're travelling over an hour to a game where the entire game lasts 2.5 hours, that might have, I'll come back to you on the exact detail behind that.
Yeah.
That's
because I understand there was a time years ago where people talked about whether the Olympic Stadium could be used to host cricket games, for example, in the summer period, which would be it's not a cricket venue, but it could be adapted to do. There are other urban grounds.
If I can tell you, Chairman, we actually looked at using the Olympic Stadium for the World Cup, and there were so many issues by changing it into a cricket ground, and the cost of doing it is started at £1 million plus. So there was a lot of negativity once we looked at that, because we saw that as an opportunity. But from a practical point of view, it just didn't stack up.
Okay, so but what you're saying is you were prepared to think laterally about where these games could be held.
And that's what we did.
And do you see now the 100 as fixed, in that the teams that have been created, the venues they play at, that will probably be consistent, or could they move around in the future if new opportunities came along?
I think the strong view of the ECB is that this is the start of the 100, and there are opportunities to hopefully, on the back of a successful tournament, building on success of county cricket and the continued success of the Vitality Blast and other short form cricket in the country, we are able to expand it. That would be a significant sign of its success. I think it's highly possible that will be the case in the future.
Expand it in terms of having more teams, you mean?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. But you don't see the teams that have been created moving necessarily from where they're based. They will. Do you see them as building a base where they are, or do you think, like an American football team, they might suddenly decide to move to another part of the country?
I would to be discussed, I think. But,
personally, Chair, from my point of view, I don't see that. I think if you're building 8 teams in 8 regions, the opportunity could be, and it'll always be under review, is do we have 2 more teams in different regions? That I think will be the discussion that happens as and when appropriate.
So you'd see it sort of over time, these new teams would start to build a relationship with the communities that they largely serve, and will be a fixture.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Just one final question I thought we should ask to Colin Graves, because I know it's something that has been reported quite a lot during your time as chairman, and that was obviously. You mentioned earlier on you were chairman of Yorkshire previously, and a number of people have reported your family trust connection, ongoing connection with Yorkshire, and your role as chair of the ECB. I wonder if you could just state for the record of the committee just how you sort of manage what could be a perceived conflict of interest, and how the board have helped you with that.
Yeah, certainly, Chair. From my point of view, yes, my family trust virtually has a financial loan arrangement with the Yorkshire County Cricket Club. That is managed by a set of professional trustees. I have nothing to do with that whatsoever, not one bit. I declared that before I even took up chairmanship of the ECB. So I have no financial involvement personally with the Yorkshire County Cricket Club. So any conflict that's either appeared to have arisen at any time, I've always excused myself from those discussions. and Camlish has chaired the board when it's come to match allocations, all those kind of things. So I made sure that I was well out of any situation where people could say I had a conflict of interest.
Yeah. So that's Lord Patel. So on decisions, any decision the board has taken which may have had a financial impact on Yorkshire Cricket Club has been a decision that's been taken without Mr. Gray's participation.
Yeah. And in terms of the information we have, the chairman doesn't need to exclude himself, actually, in terms of but he has done every time.
Yeah. I mean, do you have a sort of sense? I mean, it's one of those dilemmas. Thinking of future chairs of the ECB, having someone who's been chair of a county might be seen as a good thing in terms of experience, but nevertheless will always bring some allegation that person has an inherent interest in the county that they used to serve. I mean, do you feel the ECB's got a good structure in place now with the new board to make sure that whatever the background of the new chair, any issues like this can be managed successfully?
I think it will be. We have a nominations committee. We have a good process. It's a transparent process from recruiting from the wider world, and of course you want people with cricket knowledge as well as the business acumen to run a very complex organisation, as Colin's described. And I think we have the governance structures in place to cope with somebody with previous county experience or not.
Yeah. And just finally, just to go back to something I touched on at the beginning. Do you think the cricket board, you might develop a role similar to what football has done, where you have a representative from the professional first class game, and you have a representative from who represents minor leagues and community cricket as sort of fixtures on the board? Because I do think it does look a bit odd that none of the first class counties have a direct voice on the board.
I'll start off with that, and then I'm sure Camlish has got his view. Again, coming back to having sat on both sides of the fence as chairman of a county and where we are now, I believe that certainly the input from whether you're a county board, whether from a professional county cricket club, is better than it's ever been. So that connection is better than it's ever been. And I think if anybody says it's not, then quite honestly, I would disagree with that. Yeah. Having been part of it, of the way we communicate, the way we liaise, the meetings we have, it is fantastic. And a lot of people have said that to me within the game.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that concludes the questions from the committee for this panel. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for bringing the World Cups, and congratulations on behalf of the committee for the success of the England team this summer.
Thank you very much, Chair, for inviting us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. Are we